Throughout human history, people have encountered God. An encounter with the living God always elicits a reaction, a response. We celebrate when we recognize God's goodness in our lives. When tragedy strikes, or when God seems distant, we lament and ask God, "Where are you?" We stand in front of a mountain, or the ocean, or hear the cry of our newborn baby, and we are in awe and we worship. We realize we are carrying more than we were ever meant to carry, so we let go and we surrender. When we wander, when we see the hurt we have caused, we hear His voice calling us back, and we repent. We sing songs about all of it, from the celebrations to the laments, and everything in between. And we remember God's faithfulness. We remind our weary souls of all that He has done for us, and that He will do it again. So as we encounter the living God in the midst of our days, what will be our response?
Hello, good to see you. My name is Brooks, and I'm one of the pastors here at the church. And my family and I, we've been here just for a little bit, so we're new to the church as well. And it's been such a joy, such a privilege to start to get to know people and just start to make friends. It's been really, really fun. And we're continuing with this sermon series that we've been in for this whole year so far, and we're going to take it all the way to the end of the year. It's called Threads. And the reason why we call it Threads is because it comes with this conviction. It comes with the conviction that the story of the Bible isn't just a story. It's not just a story. The story of the Bible is the story. It's the story that tells us what's absolutely true about who God is. It tells us what's true about who we are. It tells us what's true about what our deepest longings are. It tells us what's true about what we're supposed to be and do in this world. And it's the story about how everything's going to be made right in the end. It comes with this conviction, but the thing is, and we all know this, it's a good thing to know Bible stories, right? It's a good thing to know Bible stories. We should know Bible stories, or we're going to read some tonight. But it's not enough. It's not enough just to know some Bible stories. And the reason why is because that you can know lots of Bible stories and still miss the story of the Bible. You could know lots of Bible stories and still completely miss the whole story. Think of it like a tree. Like when you cut a cross section out of a tree, you can tell a lot about that tree, right? You can see how old it is, and you can tell some things that tree has gone through. But also, a cross section of a tree is way different than standing in front of the tree and just looking at the whole thing, right? And likewise, Bible stories are so great. They're going to give us glimpses and show us things, but we want to be able to step back and not miss the story. So that's why we're in this sermon series. One of the best ways to be able to look at the whole tree is to trace the threads. There's all these different threads throughout Scripture, and so we've been tracing a lot of them throughout the course of this year. We're going to continue all the way to the end, but today, what we're going to talk about is response. How do we respond to God? And that video just outlines some of the things that we're going to be talking about over the next handful of Sundays. There's all sorts of different ways that we are invited to respond to God. And some of those responses they're appropriate responses. Sometimes we can respond to God in inappropriate ways, or we fail to respond at all. And so we want to be able to just look at some of the different ways that we get to respond to God. Today I want to tackle a rumor, okay? I want to tackle a rumor. Maybe you've heard this rumor. The rumor is this. The rumor is Christians don't know how to have a good time. Have you heard this rumor? Anybody? But when I was pastoring my church that I was previously to this, I was pastoring a church in Eugene, Oregon. And for the first year of pastoring that church, I was also working at Starbucks. And so when I'm working at Starbucks, I'm just starting out there and getting to know the people that are working there. And, I've been around long enough and been a pastor long enough to know that sometimes it's not the best to lead out in your relationships building with I'm a pastor, because then a lot of times people form their perception of you from the very beginning, and then it's hard to build relationship. So it's not that I'm ashamed of it, but it's just, I just don't always lead with it, especially when I'm just meeting new people. And so I worked there for about 3 months. I'm just getting to know the people, and, we're on our headsets just making fun of what drinks people order, and we're just laughing and making jokes. And then word got around the store that Brooks pastors a church in town. And so I show up to work one day and they're, wait, you're like a pastor? You're like a minister? What? I say, yeah, that's what I do. And they're like, well, that's weird because you're like so fun. Like, that's just so strange, and it was just mind-boggling to them. And so maybe you've felt that way, or maybe you've met some people that have believed this rumor that Christians don't know how to have any fun. And certainly, lots of people have this view. They have this view that surrendering your life to Jesus means no more fun, no more celebrating. If you are faithful to Jesus, that means everything is serious. Now, certainly the world, kind of the outside world, has its view of what fun is, and sometimes a lot of those kinds of fun actually just leave you more empty and leave you more dry, and it's just a glimmer of a taste of what people are really searching for, which the Bible describes as joy. But unfortunately, sometimes out of reaction, Christ followers can take this opposite approach. And the opposite approach, sometimes Christ followers, they believe this, is that spiritual maturity means somber, no fun. Do you remember that movie Monty Python and the Holy Grail? Anybody? Remember there's these group of monks that walk around and they go, O Nes Dominem. Remember that? They just hit themselves over the head with boards. And that's the view that so many different people have, that, man, what spiritual mature. Unfortunately, some Christians have gone the opposite direction and said, hey, man, the world has all this crazy fun. If we're going to be spiritually mature, that means everything's serious. And, maybe some people, maybe you might be sitting here and thinking, yeah, it is serious. It is serious, Brooks. There's a sign out there that we leave that says eternity is at stake. And that's serious. And I would agree, yes, it is serious. It's so serious that we should take what the Bible says about celebrating very seriously. And so that's what we're gonna explore. One of the appropriate ways to respond to God is with celebration, is celebrating. And I'm just so glad you're here, because again, I don't know your story. I don't know maybe what you were brought up to believe. Maybe you were brought up to believe that the more faithful you are to God, then that means the less celebrating that you should be doing. I don't know. Maybe you have friends that view Christianity in that way. I don't know your story, but I'm so glad you're here, because this is what I hope that we can see. What I hope that we can see is that out of all people in the world, we have some of the best reasons. We have the best reasons to celebrate. And not only that, if we're gonna take the gospel seriously, and if we're gonna take the Bible seriously, then we should be serious about following what the Bible says, just looking at the whole picture, looking at the whole tree of what it means to be a people of celebration. And as C.S. Lewis said, we not only get to celebrate because we have the best reasons for it, but also as Christians, it is our duty. It's our duty to celebrate well. It's an important topic because it's important just having a robust Christian theology of celebration, or we could call it a discipline of celebration. It's important. It's important for our hearts. It's important for our discipleship as Christ followers, and it's important to our witness to a watching world. So let's take a quick survey of the Bible, all right? Real quick survey. Genesis 1, God creates all things, and you get a sense that he's enjoying what he's doing. When you read those passages in Genesis 1 and 2, you get a sense. Have you ever seen a master craftsman just doing their craft? Just at work doing what they were made to do. I mean, there's this sense of enjoyment that comes from it. And you get this sense that God's just enjoying that process. And he calls it, and he says, it is good. It is good. And then after that, he creates humans in his image, and he creates them in his image with the capacity to be able to celebrate, to enjoy, to create, and to delight. That God in his nature has those things, and though he passes those traits on to humanity, that we have the capacity to do the same. And then God gives them one rule. I love this. This is not a God of rules. This is not a God of, hey, I'm gonna create everything, and then here's my list of do's and don'ts. I've got a lot of them. And he's just this isn't the story. The beginning of the story is there's one rule, because God knows if they obey me about the tree, if they obey me, if they just let me be king, and if they just trust me, then all of their deepest longings will be met. Everything that they're looking for will be found here, under my authority. And things are good. There's one rule. Question, how long do the good times last? About 2 pages, right? It doesn't last very long because humanity, they believe this lie that no, if I'm gonna have real fun, if I'm gonna be able to if I'm gonna really meet my longings that I have, then I want to be out from under God's authority. They believe this lie, and what happens is just pain and death and destruction and brokenness just come crashing down. But in the midst of that, there's this promise. There's this promise from God that he will not abandon us. That he is going to not leave or forsake them, but he's going to walk with them, and that he promises someone to come, a new Adam who isn't going to believe the lie, a new Adam who is going to trust the Father, a new Adam who's going to come and pay the price for everything that was done, and someone who's going to come and right all the wrongs and pave a way back to the garden. It's good news. But then we get into the Old Testament, and if you've ever read any of the Old Testament, you will see this cycle, and it just cycles over and over and over again. It's this cycle of the people say, God, we love you, and then they follow him for a little while, and then they say, you know what, actually, we'll be better off by ourselves. And so they go off by themselves, and then things go poorly. They do not go well. And then they cry out, God, rescue us. And so then God comes and rescues. And then God says, remember what kind of a God I am. And so they would create a holiday, a feast, a celebration, like a marker, an altar, and they would remember. And then a little bit later, God, we don't need you. And then, God, we need you. And God would show up, and over again. There's just this cycle that just plays out. It's a tale as old as time. It just continues. It continues in our hearts as well. But at each step, God says, hey, I want you to remember. And so they create these celebrations and these holidays. And before you know it, listen, the whole Jewish calendar revolved around great parties. You know that? If there's anybody that knows how to party, it's Jewish people. I don't know if you knew that. I mean, there's just parties, and there's good food and celebrations, and all of it is just remembering the stories and pointing to God, and it's just this cycle that goes through. And so it shouldn't surprise us that when Jesus arrives onto the scene as a baby, it is good news and great joy for all the people. It's good news. The shepherds, the people who you wouldn't have expected, are the first ones invited to the party. And then as we just continue in Jesus' life, because of Jesus' ministry, remember Jesus' first miracle as he starts his earthly ministry? Where is Jesus at his first miracle? He's at a party. He's at a wedding party, and he changes the water into wine. He takes a celebration and makes it an even better celebration. I mean, he just cranks it up a little bit. This is Jesus' ministry. Here's a question for you. Think about it. What's the best party you've ever been to? Think about the best party you've ever been to. And no, I'm not talking about your college parties. If you can't remember it, it doesn't count as a good party, all right? So not your college parties. Just think about the best party you've ever been to. Think about it. Now, I don't know what party that was for you, but here's what I'm going to bet. There was probably really good food there. There was really good food there. That's one of the hallmarks of a great party. There's just tons of food, good food. And Jesus knows all about this. Jesus knows all about this. We're going to look at two passages from the Gospel of Luke. And this first one, Jesus is talking with a group of they're called the Pharisees. There's the religious leaders. We could consider them a little bit stuffy. They're rule followers. They just couldn't see Jesus for who he was. And Jesus is always in these conversations with them, trying to help them understand what he's here to do and who he is. And in this conversation, he's talking with them, and here's what he says. Listen, he says, Jesus went on to say to them, he says, "To what then can I compare the people of this generation? What are they like? They are like children sitting in the marketplace and calling out to each other, 'We played the pipe for you, and you did not dance.'" It's like a little limerick that Jesus is quoting here. I mean, it's just so interesting. It would have been something probably that they were familiar with. He says, "They're like children sitting in the marketplace calling out to each other, 'We played the pipe for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge,'" which is like a somber song, "and you did not cry." And then he says, "For John the Baptist came neither eating bread or drinking wine, and you say he has a demon. And the Son of Man," he's talking about himself, and I came eating and drinking, and you say he's a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by all her children." What is Jesus saying here? I love it. It's like Jesus is saying, "Man, you guys are a tough crowd. So tough. I mean, it's like, I can't get anything right with you guys. I can't win. John is too sad and I'm too happy. You know, the porridge is too hot, the porridge is too cold for you guys." It's like Jesus they're frustrated at Jesus because apparently he's celebrating too much and enjoying good food with friends and eating at too many tables with questionable individuals. And they are mad about it. Apparently Jesus celebrated a lot. Apparently Jesus celebrated and laughed a lot. And he ate good food with people. Luke's gospel is full of stories of Jesus eating with people. One commentator that I read literally said, I quote, one commentator said, "In Luke's gospel, Jesus is either going to a meal, at a meal, or coming from a meal." I mean, Jesus is literally eating his way through the book of Luke. I love this. I mean, he's just at table after table. This is one of the reasons why we really believe in home groups, in small groups, because we believe that the ministry just doesn't happen here at the church campus. Ministry happens around your dining room table. Jesus did tons of ministry, just tons around tables with good food. Jesus apparently knew how to celebrate. And then you fast forward, we get to the end of the story of the Bible, and we get to the end, we get to Revelation chapter 19, and what do we have at the very end? We have a banquet. It's called the wedding feast of the Lamb. And you can read about it in Revelation chapter 19. It's this beautiful picture of when all things are done, when all things are made right. What is it? It's a party. It's a celebration. It's a really good meal around a really big table, around people who so don't deserve to be there, but because of the grace of Jesus, we're there. And there's a party, and it's a celebration. That's where the story ends. The story begins with "it is good," and the story ends with "it is good." That right there is reason to celebrate. This is why the Apostle Paul can say, "Rejoice in the Lord always." And again I say, rejoice. Because he gets it. He gets it. Just a brief overview of what's going on in the scripture. Are you beginning to see that if we're going to be serious about following Jesus, then we should seriously consider how, like Jesus, we should be serious about being seriously good at celebrating. Seriously. I want to take you to Luke chapter 15. It's a famous chapter because it contains probably one of the most famous parables, a group of parables that Jesus tells. And you'll see right off from the bat, we can't read the whole thing, but it's so worth the whole read. Just read the whole thing. But you'll see from the beginning that there's a diverse group of people that Jesus is telling this parable to. And Jesus taught in parables a lot. It's these stories that just kind of get to the heart. And we know from the beginning that there's these religious leaders there, they're frustrated. And then we're also told that there's these tax collectors and sinners. There's just these people who kind of already feel like they shouldn't be invited to the table. And then there's another group of people that feel like that those other people shouldn't be invited to the table like they should be invited to the table. And they're all there. And Jesus starts to tell this parable, and it is dynamite. And so much can be taken from it. I just want to take you on this little journey in Luke chapter 15. Here's what he says. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." And then Jesus told them this parable, and he tells them this group of 3 parables. The first is the parable of the good shepherd that loses a sheep, and he leaves the 99 to go find the sheep. And then there's this parable of this lost coin. And so everybody's searching for the coin, and when they find the coin, they celebrate. And then he gets to what's commonly referred to as the parable of the prodigal son. But if we were to call it the parable of the prodigal son, we'd be wrong. Because it isn't just the story of the prodigal son. There's 2 sons in the story, and both are lost. And Jesus just masterfully, talking to this diverse groups of people, brings it to this parable. And so he says this, verse 11, Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them." Now, if you've been around church at all, then you've heard some of this before. And if you're new, I couldn't think of a better night for you to be here. This is a beautiful parable Jesus tells. But when the younger son says, "I want my inheritance now," that would have been a huge slap in the face. Because when do you get the inheritance when you're a son? You get it when the father's dead. That's when you get the inheritance. So when the younger son says, "I want it now," what is he saying? It's a slap in the face. It's an insult. He's saying, "Dad, I don't want you at all. I just want your stuff. I wish you were dead so I could have what I want now." It's like he's in this family and he's thinking, "Man, I'm just all this control and Dad's just trying to control me. If I could just get out from under his authority, man, I'll have it made in the shade. Things will be good and I'll be happy and I'll have real fun." And so he says, "I want the stuff now." So the father, graciously, he divides his property between them. He continues on. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had and he set off for a distant country and there squandered his wealth in wild living. So he goes out and he's probably thinking, Party Like a Rock Star is playing in his head, when he's going out there. He's like, "Yeah, I'm the boss, I'm free. I get to have fun now." And every so often in the middle of doing what he's doing, there's these pangs, these moments of feeling like he misses home. Feeling like, man, I feel like I might be blowing it here. I feel like I actually had it kind of good. But as soon as he has those feelings, he just decides to drink more. He decides just to do some online shopping more. He just decides to I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. It just kind of drowns it out. But he gets to the point. He gets to the point where he just feels empty. This is the kind of celebrating that leaves you more empty afterwards. Verse 14, after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine a severe famine. That's a good Bible story right there, maybe, in the whole country. And he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. And when he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired servants.'" He's reached the end of himself. And you can see what he's doing. He's at the lowest of the low. And so he starts He starts thinking, I'm going to go back. And you know what? He starts rehearsing what he's going to say. You've done that. You know, when you're about to go into an important meeting or something, you rehearse what you're going to say. And so he's rehearsing his little speech, you know, that he's going to have for his dad, because surely he's not going to be welcomed back as a son. Oh, no, it's not even in his mind. He's not going to be welcomed back as a son. He might have a chance of being welcomed back as a servant. And so that's his play. That's what he's thinking he's going to do, just to get his foot in the door. And so, verse 20, he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, the father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. So he ran to his son and he threw his arms around him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servant, and I like to think that he didn't even get a chance to finish. You know, I just feel like he got like partway through, and the father says, no. And the father does this. The father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. What happens? Let's have a feast and celebrate. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead, and he's alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. They celebrate. And guys, this would have been extravagant. I mean, bring the fattened calf. The fattened calf is only brought out with just, this would have been saved for something so special. And the father's like, no, now is that time. Bring it out. I mean, they are going to party. And then, this is what happens next. Meanwhile, verse 25, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. And when he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. I mean, just picture this. He's out in the field, and he's like, what's that? And he walks over, and he gets a little closer, and he hears the It's like coming from the tent over there, and he's, what is that? Well, they're having a party, and then he hears that it's for his brother. His brother's back. So he called one of his servants and asked him what was going on, and the servant says, your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. And the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him? I mean, do you hear it in there? I mean, I hear it too. I hear it in my heart. I mean, I'm frustrated at this older brother, but I can also sympathize just a little bit, because I feel like that is kind of lurking around in my heart as well. I mean, he's like, I've been faithful, and you haven't even given me a goat. I've been dutiful. I do stuff for you. He says, what about mine? What's in it for me? I've been doing all the stuff, but what's in it for me? Man, if I was his dad, I don't know what I would do. If I was his dad, I'd say, wait, we're out here talking about a goat? We talking about a goat? We talking about a goat? I mean, we're talking about a goat? He says, listen, do you hear the music in there? I mean, this isn't an ordinary party. I mean, dad threw hard cash at a band. We got a band in there. I mean, the fattened calf, we're eating steak in there. And you want to be out here pouting? Because what? Because you don't, smoke or chew or run with people who do? Like, is that what you want to do out here? You just want to be out here and just pout about the whole thing? He says, no, come in. I mean, that's probably what the attitude that I would have had. But that's not what the attitude that this father has. Listen to what this father says. He says, my son, this is verse 31, my son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate. We had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost, and he's found. You know what's so brilliant about this parable? It ends right there. That's where it ends. Jesus goes along, starts talking about other stuff. That's the end of the story. It's a cliffhanger. It's like an episode of Lost, for those of you who are tracking with me. It's a cliffhanger. This is where it leaves off. And it's brilliant because it begs, it just draws us in, and we're asking the question, does the older son get to the party? Does he go? We don't know. We're left wondering, is the older brother gonna go to the party? This is such a brilliant parable. You see what Jesus is doing here? I mean, Jesus is trying to help them see and us see that both sons are lost. They're just lost in very similar but different ways. The younger brother is lost in his rebelliousness, but the older brother is lost in his pride. They both essentially just want dad's stuff. The younger brother's gonna get it by taking it. The older brother's gonna get it by earning it. Both of them just want the father's stuff and not the father. But they're just gonna do it in different ways. And Jesus masterfully is trying to help us see that both of them are lost. What's interesting about this is younger brother lostness is so much easier to diagnose, isn't it? It's so much easier to see. Because when pig slop is the only thing on the menu, things aren't going well for you, right? It's time to reassess your decisions when pig slop is the only thing on the menu. And so younger brother lostness is it's easy to see. It's very obvious. It's so much harder to see older brother lostness. When you're eating steak and you're in the house, so hard to see, so hard to diagnose. But listen, who ends up going to the party? We don't know if the older brother gets there, but we know the younger brother gets there. It's the person who is willing to admit that they need to come home. It's the person that's just willing to drop their pride. It's the person that's just willing to admit that, hey, I was doing all this just because I wanted my father's stuff and I didn't want the father. It's just the person that's just willing to admit that and just get honest. That's the person that ends up getting to the party. Did you guys see this in the story? Did you see that the father had to run out to both sons? Did you see that? The father has to run out to both sons. He comes out and he runs out to both because he wants both of them at the party. Because he's created this party, but it's only the one who's just willing to admit that I need you, Father. I can't do it on my own. And the invitation to that party is ours. It's yours. It's yours. The invitation is there. Whatever brand of lostness that you might find yourself into, the invitation is out there and it's clear. Come to the celebration. We had to celebrate because he was lost. Because they were lost and now they're found. Just a couple closing thoughts, just quick thoughts on just celebrating. A couple things. Number one is when celebrating, notice we didn't say if celebrating, we said when celebrating. Remember to give God glory. Number one, remember to give God glory. I know our culture thinks it knows how to celebrate, but like we've said, so much of our culture's understanding of celebration can be destructive, it can be empty, it can feel good in the moment, but then leave you feeling like you have less. We just always have to remember that all of our earthly pleasures, all of the things that we can enjoy and experience, that all of them are incomplete. That God created this world and he invites us to enjoy the things of this world, but they're incomplete. They're supposed to point us to our true home. They're supposed to be tastes and glimpses of what our hearts truly desire. And so the answer for Christ followers isn't to kind of pendulum swing on the other side and say, the world out there, they're celebrating, so we're just gonna not celebrate. No, the answer isn't to not enjoy what God has created. The answer for us is to enjoy rightly. To enjoy rightly. to celebrate the things that he's made and celebrate this world and to give him glory in the middle of it. We get to celebrate rightly and enjoy what he has made. Remember that the reason that you can eat good food is because God made things called taste buds. Praise God. Remember this weekend when you're eating whatever you're eating for the 4th of July and you're enjoying whatever it is you cooked up. God didn't have to make taste buds, but he did. Why? Because God's good. He wants us to enjoy his good world. In a way, all celebration points to the ultimate one who created it all. And we get to do that when we celebrate. Number 2 is when celebrating, be humbled by grace. Be humbled by grace. Jesus, in another section, and we're not going to read it, but Jesus had this moment where the little kids wanted to come play with Jesus, and the disciples were like, no, he's busy. He's got important stuff to do. And Jesus says, no, let the little children come to me. And then Jesus says this incredible thing. He says, if you want to enter my kingdom, then you've got to become like one of these children. And there's so much to be taken from that. There's a whole sermon series in and of itself. But here's one of the things we know about kids. Kids know how to have fun, right? You do not have to teach a kid how to enjoy a celebration. My 3-year-old baby girl just had her 3-year-old birthday, and it was a unicorn birthday. And we were very serious about celebrating this unicorn birthday. And every week, months before the party, Noelle would say, Dad, are you going to come to my unicorn birthday? Oh, yeah. And it was an epic unicorn birthday. It was so much fun. You don't have to teach kids how to celebrate. Kids just know how to celebrate. But I think sometimes when we get older, we tend to get a little crusty sometimes. It's not, we're adults, we got important business, we're doing stuff. And sometimes we just forget that, man, God he wants us to be like little kids sometimes and just enjoy. I mean, wasn't it so fun for me as a parent to put on an awesome unicorn birthday? I mean, when Noelle is enjoying unicorn birthday, guess what that does for my heart? Oh man, we're loving it, right? We love it. And it's like when we celebrate, it's like our Heavenly Father says, yeah, that's great. And Richard Foster, famous author, and probably is just his most popular classic book, The Celebration of Discipline. Richard, he talks about how celebration is a spiritual, he calls it a spiritual discipline. And in fact, he believes that it's such an important spiritual discipline that he put it in the last chapter of his book because he thought it was one of the most important things. And he wanted to end his book on the spiritual discipline. We don't often think of celebration as a discipline, but he did. Listen to what he says. I love what he says here. He says, far and away, the most important benefit of celebration is that it saves us from taking ourselves too seriously. This is a desperately needed grace for all those who are earnest about the spiritual disciplines. It is an occasion or an occupational hazard of devout folk to become stuffy bores. He said it, I didn't. This should not be, he says. Of all people, we should be the most free, alive, and interesting. I love that. Of all people, we should be the most free and alive and interesting. After all, Jesus rejoiced so fully in life that he was accused of being a wine bibber and a glutton. Many of us lead such sour lives that we cannot possibly be accused of such things. In celebration, the high and the mighty regain their balance, and the weak and the lowly receive new stature. Who can be high or low at the festival of God? Together, the rich and the poor, the powerful and the powerless all celebrate the glory and wonder of God. Listen to this. There is no leveler of caste systems like festivity. Wow. It's just an encouragement that we can take Jesus really seriously, but not take ourselves too seriously. It was G.K. Chesterton that said that angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. I love that. Actually, just walking in here tonight, I bumped into one of our middle school leaders, and he had a bucket of water balloons. And I was like, what are those for? And he's like, oh, this is what junior high's doing tonight. We're having a water balloon fight. Parents, just say, I don't know if you do that, but okay, that's what's happening, all right? They're out there. Be prepared for a wet car, I don't know. But they're gonna have a water balloon fight. It's a hot day, they're gonna go and do it. And I was like, oh, have fun. I was walking away and I was just thinking about the sermon and thinking about tonight. And I started to chuckle. Like, honestly, I started to chuckle because I thought, like, what if Like, how hilarious would it be if we, instead of having church like this, what if we just canceled it like this and we just had a water balloon fight? And I was literally thinking, like, could we do that? And we're not going to do it, okay? We're never going to do it because we'll get lots of probably upset emails and things like that, But I was laughing. You know why I was laughing about it? Just picturing all of you throwing water balloons at each other. You know why I was laughing? It's because I was thinking, you know what? If we actually did that sometime, I think Jesus would smile. I think he would smile. We don't have to take ourselves too seriously. Number 3, when celebrating, remember that the world is watching. Remember that the world's watching. Imagine. Just remember those people at Starbucks, that I was working with. They're just so surprised that I could laugh at a joke. I don't know. It was so foreign to them. Can you imagine? What if we followed Jesus so faithfully that as we just go out in the world, what if we could teach the world what real celebration looks like? What if we could teach the world what celebrating can look like robust, deep, gut belly laugh, enjoy what God has made in this world? What if we could teach the world what it looks like to celebrate? Because we have the best reasons to celebrate. Imagine if we bumped into people and maybe we're making friends in our community, and imagine if we had the kind of impact where they said, man, I'm not sure what they believe yet. I'm not sure if I believe what they believe, but man, I sure do love hanging out with them. I sure do love just spending time with them. Imagine if that's what it looked like. Lastly, when celebrating, we get a foretaste of what is to come. We get a foretaste of what is to come. When you read the Bible, there's these two characters, these two animals that show up just a few places. Job, I think Isaiah, I think in a book of Psalm it mentions these two weird animals, Leviathan and Behemoth. Leviathan, this water monster, and Behemoth, the equivalent of of Leviathan just on the land. And people have, what is this? And people have all sorts of theories. What is Leviathan? What is Behemoth? Well, in the Jewish imagination, Leviathan and Behemoth, they represented chaos, they represented evil, they represented death. They represented, because they're untamable beasts, and they can just wreak havoc on anything. And so it's in the Jewish imagination, Leviathan and Behemoth are this picture of what was unleashed on humanity when Adam and Eve sinned, when we rebelled against God. All those things just got unleashed. And remember that wedding feast of the Lamb? Remember we talked about that? At the end of the story, Revelation 19, there's this wedding banquet, this culminating party, that we get to celebrate in. Remember that? Have you ever wondered what was being served at that meal? The early rabbis had a theory. The early rabbis had a theory that what's being served at the wedding feast of the Lamb is Leviathan and Behemoth. That at the end of all things, we get to have a barbecue. And on the grill is oppression and violence and evil and wickedness and death and destruction. Those are on the grill. And finally, what's said in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 will come to pass. That evil and death will be swallowed up in victory. That's reason to celebrate.